Now, one particularly interesting type of autobiographical memory that's received considerable research attention are what is known as flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories are generally thought to be vivid and detailed memories that we possess for dramatic events that have significance to us. So according to Roger Brown and James Kulik, these kinds of flashbulb memories are richly detailed, almost sensory memory of the circumstances in which a highly affect-laden, so in other words, highly emotional event occurred. So for example, the typical sorts of flashbulb memories that are referenced in the literature would be people's memory for the assassination of JFK, when people landed on the moon, or the death of Princess Diana. More contemporary examples for the sort of 9/11 terrorist attack, or culturally specific, it might be the passing of the king a few years ago, or more recently the kind of death of Kobe Bryant. So it's the idea that whatever you're doing at the time when you hear this event, or these details, you're likely to store a rich, vivid impression of this. And it's often made the case that these dramatic events activate special neural mechanisms that cause details of the event to be permanently printed in memory. And in some ways, this idea would have a kind of evolutionary plausibility. It would be an adaptive strategy for us to record critical moments in our lives in great detail. So if there was something incredibly scary, such as being attacked by a lion on the savannah, it would make sense if you could store with a rich amount of detail that event, just so you could then learn from it more accurately. When researchers have experimentally tested the characteristics of flashbulb memories, they generally tend to find there's a pattern of details that people would recall about these occasions. So for example, a study that was done by Mullane and colleagues asked people to free recall their memories during the Challenger disaster. So this was a rocket explosion in the US in 1986. That a lot of people would have been watching on live TV. When they asked people to free recall details of this, generally they would possess about 6 or so of the following memories during the event. So they would have a flashbulb memory for the time that they heard the disaster, the place where they heard it, the ongoing event, so what they were doing at the current time, the informant who told them about it, who else was present at the time, the subject's own effect, so how they were emotionally feeling upon this news, others' affect, so how it was affecting other people around you, were they sad, were they upset, etc. The subject's first thoughts after hearing the news, and the aftermath of the incident. So these are kind of common themes across flashbulb memories. Despite people often possessing vivid and detailed memories of such events, flashbulb memories may not be as accurate as they appear to be. So for example, participants asked about the Challenger disaster were highly confident of the accuracy of their memories, but when you actually looked at the accounts that they were giving, it turned out that many of these retellings of their flashbulb memories contained inaccuracies. And when they followed up with people at a later time, a lot of the time their memories bore little to no resemblance of their original accounts. Similarly, there's some research by Pezdek and colleagues where they asked US students whether they saw a videotape on TV of the first plane striking the first tower. So this is following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. 73% of the students said yes, despite the fact that there was no television footage of this event occurring at the time that they were being asked. And indeed, people's strong emotional responses was often associated with or led to poor recall of 9/11 events. Along the same lines, there was research by a Swedish researcher called Larsson, who performed a self-study. So that is a study of his own memories. And he was doing this to try and compare the accuracy of recollections of personal and public events. So every day from January the 1st through to June the 30th in 1986, he recorded in a diary one public news event and one personal experience. So for each of those days, he would record the event describing who it occurred to, what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. He then tested these memories at intervals of 5 weeks and 4 months after they occurred. And what did he find? Basically, there was evidence that the autobiographical memories that he had tended to be better remembered than public events, and even the highly salient public events, so the ones that should be kind of flashbulb memories, such as the Challenger disaster occurred at the same time. There was the Chernobyl disaster, so the meltdown of the nuclear reactor. These things were no better recalled than autobiographical memories that he was having about personally significant events. So in conclusion, there is something more distinct and significant about flashbulb memories, but apart from that, there's probably very little that distinguishes flashbulb memories from ordinary autobiographical events, beyond the fact that we might end up encountering some more rehearsal and retelling of these flashbulb events. Now, a nice study that tries to get at the accuracy of some of the flashbulb memories was conducted by Tallarico and Rubin, and they conducted this the very next day after the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York. So the day after these terrorist attacks occurred, where a plane was flown into the Twin Towers, they asked students to recall as many details as they could about the 9/11 terrorist attack, and also about a regular everyday memory. So these everyday memories in the figures are represented with the blue dash lines, and the flashbulb memory is represented in the red line. So they got all 54 students to do this one day afterwards. They then asked different groups of students to try and recall as many details, either 7, 42, or 224, which is 32 weeks later. And they asked different groups of participants to report this after. So there was 18 participants that gave the recall responses after 7 days, another 18 of them after 42 days, and a separate group after 224 days. This was important in order to try to avoid any kind of rehearsal effect. So you don't want to study people's ability if they're regularly rehearsing or repeating these memories over time. So what did they find from this? Generally, there wasn't much difference in terms of the number of details that people were able to recall for the everyday and the flashbulb memories. So these were on the left-hand side graph. The number of details is kind of gradually going down over time. However, despite this gradual decrease in the kind of accuracy or the number of details that they're recording, where the difference does occur is that people believed that the vividness of their flashbulb memories remained high throughout that entire period. So you tend to get this major discrepancy between people's beliefs in the strength of their flashbulb memories and the actual accuracy of those memories. Okay, so why do we mistakenly believe that our flashbulb memories are exceptionally accurate? I think in general, there isn't much evidence to suggest that there is a great distinction between everyday and flashbulb memories. They generally tend to involve the same sorts of processes. One thing is, with all of these memories, they are constructed over a period of time rather than being fully formed at once. So it's very unlikely that you would be able to form a flashbulb memory that can't be influenced or distorted by additional information that you receive later. So these flashbulb memories are just as fragile as other memories and can be altered by information that we get both at the time of recall and through other information that we might add to the memory. So in other words, if you think about something particularly vivid that has happened to you, so something you would consider a flashbulb memory, and then think about the conversations that you might have had with people afterwards, it's just as easy that in those conversations immediately after the event, people give you information that you then incorporate into your own memory for that event. And you might believe that it's true, you might have a very vivid representation of it, but there doesn't seem to be much evidence that the information that you have for these flashbulb memories is necessarily much more accurate than the memories that you have for everyday autobiographical events. However, there are others that argue that the intensity of the emotional experience can lead to more vivid and detailed memories. So some research on this by Charlotte et al. Looked at what was the accuracy of people's memories based on the actual distance they were to the World Trade Center where the 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred. And they compared people that lived 2 miles away, so those that would have been very much caught up, would have probably felt a high degree of threat, would have seen a lot of the instances firsthand, versus those that were 4.5 miles away. So you're still going to have a very strong emotional response, but you're not necessarily quite so involved or quite so threatened by the experience. And they found that those that lived closer had better accuracy or better memories for the terrorist attacks than those that lived sort of 4 or 5 miles away.